Thank you. Good afternoon. If I call your name, if you'll indicate present or I or here. We'll start with our CCOG board members. Director Bulahan,
Here.
Desmond absent, Gallardo absent, Gog absent, Guerrero absent, Harris absent, Saragosa absent, Lauren.
Here.
Yay. Vice Chair Soon
Here.
and Chair Jennings is currently absent. And then our external members, Elisa Herrera is joining us online.
Here.
Thank you. Christine Tien, absent. Marco Lizarraga, absent. Maria Chacon-Nistet. Kendra Lewis, absent. Raul Martinez. William Walker, absent. Omni Barnes, absent. And Woody Deloria. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And we will have our fearless chair and leader, Mr. Jennings, later on this afternoon. So we'll hang on till then. So I wanted to start us off in tradition with a icebreaker. I think some of you might be familiar with the topic from the previous ad hoc meetings. I personally, my wife and I just got back from China in September, so we got to cross that off our list. But we'd love to hear from all of you what place in the world you would like to visit and why. Does anyone want to go first? Anyone online? Don't jump all at once.
I'll start.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Cocoa Grove Resort in Siquijor, Philippines.
Wow.
Yeah,
I never heard of it.
yeah,
Just a reminder, if you could use your microphones,
Oh,
that
yeah.
way it goes into Zoom. Thank you. Sorry about that.
yeah. No, I'm just kidding.
Say that again, please.
Okay,
because I
so
never-
Cocoa Grove Beach Resort in Siquijor, Philippines. So to get there, I remember in '92, it took a minimum 2 planes and a boat one way to get this. But I also remember there's a dive shop here in town that used to sponsor dive trips to that resort. So I'm like, oh, somebody like the Sacramento heard of this place. So I don't think anybody heard of that place. But yeah, I mean, it's nice amenities over there.
You want to go there for the dive resort?
No, just to hang out too.
Okay. Great. Cocoa Grove. I'll have to add
Yeah.
that to my to-do list as well.
I'll go.
Okay.
I love to visit San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. It's just beautiful. The streets are beautiful. The people are beautiful. There's culture and art all around. And the weather's generally perfect.
Sounds like a great place.
And I've got friends there right now, but I'm here.
Sending you Facebook pictures, I'm sure, to make you
Yes.
jealous. Yeah. Anyone
We'll
else?
just
Want to
go
go around the
this way.
round
Yeah,
robin?
sure.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Sure. So we had a meeting, was it yesterday or the day before yesterday? I think Tuesday. Okay. See, all the days are blending together. And so I revealed that the place I would like to go to next is Scotland. My daughter is studying in Spain this next semester, and so we're gonna go to Spain. I've been to Spain. I actually studied in Spain as well when I was in school, and then so we're gonna take another trip to Scotland. And I've always been fascinated with that country, with the UK in particular, because my sister does a lot of genealogy research, and one of the surprising things that came out of that sort of DNA is that sort of weirdly, there's some distant relationship to Richard III, who I have been, yeah, I mean, distant. I mean, we're all related, at one point, like we're all related. But I had been reading a lot of that type of history, like 13 books on Richard III. And so when I learned that was something that I was like, okay, this is on the bucket list. So it's kind of weird, kind of an outlier, but I'm going.
I love it. We have amazing royalty among us.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Thank you, Your Highness. I'll try to follow that.
That's great.
So some of you know me that I travel quite a bit for fly fishing. But my wife and I also love to travel together as well, usually not fly fishing centric. I just got back from Greenland about a month ago. That was a bucket list trip, but I'm young and I have a pretty big bucket. So the next trip will be Papua New Guinea for fly fishing. That will be an exploratory trip with a group of folks that I travel with and fly fish with. But my wife and I are trying to plan a trip to Cuba and to Bhutan. those two locations. Both, places we've never been before and wanna, Bhutan measures their gross domestic happiness, not gross domestic product, so
Huh,
that seems like a cool place to go explore, so that's it.
I like that, domestic happiness. That's great. Go ahead, Casey.
All right, I'll go. So I shared this in an ad hoc group, but I want to go to Machu Picchu. I love going to places and seeing their, signs of what those civilizations were in the past. I've been to Pompeii. I've been to many of the ruins of Roman Empire in Italy. I've been to, Hutongs in Beijing and some of the like ancient, architectures there. I haven't been to South America, and I was like, man, that would be a great place to start. So
Love that.
All right, so I'm thinking about places where I'd be interested to go. I'd like to go to Finland. So I've been to Norway and Sweden before, but really kind of interested in like the differences between the different Scandinavian countries. So love that. Plus somewhere a little cooler, a lot of vacations are hot these days. So I want to get somewhere where it's nice and cool.
Nice.
I'm doubling down in the South America. I had this fascination with Buenos Aires, and so I totally, if you've got food and music and dance, I'm want to go. My daughter, who is in theater school, as I've told many of you repeatedly ad nauseum, also wants to be a minor in urban planning, do a minor. She's like, Dad, I found a program in Buenos Aires for next semester. I'm like, yes, it's going to happen. So that's my plan.
Beautiful. How about you, Annette?
It won't come as a surprise to James, but England, I have a lot of ancestry from there, so I'd like to go and see where my ancestors came from, so.
Oh, fantastic.
Thanks, Lynette. So, my name Alex. Hokkaido, Japan. I've wanted to go to Japan for many years. I just think it's an amazing place and the food is amazing. But Hokkaido also has lavender fields, and I would like to go see the lavender fields of Hokkaido.
Beautiful.
Danielle DeRuyter Williams. And it changes by the day, depending on what weather I'm currently in and what I want the opposite of, or if I like it or not. It's actually bearable in New Orleans right now, so enjoying that. But I'm really interested in going to the Netherlands. My last name, DeRuyter, is actually Dutch. Half Dutch. I come from like the Western Michigan Dutch folks. And so I've been all over Europe, but not to the Netherlands. So that's definitely on my list. I would not go right now though, because I feel like it would be too cold. So that's like a summer trip. Yeah.
Great.
Great. Well, getting lots of good ideas here. So taking stock,
Yes.
and I'm glad this meeting is being recorded so I can go back and, I'd love to, never been to Italy and to Rome, although I don't know that we'll make it in 2025. I hear there's gonna be lots of foot traffic with the Jubilee, although as a Catholic, maybe the nice thing is there's specials on confessionals, and I've got certainly lots of confessions to make, but millions of people, as I understand, for the Jubilee and Rome, but eventually to Italy. So yeah, thanks.
Fantastic. Let's go online.
All right. Well, I'm going to join those of you who want to go to South America. I'm going to start with Brazil. I have been to the state of Santa Catarina before, and I loved it. It was just such a great connection for me, and I'd love to go back and visit the rest of the states.
Beautiful.
I'll go real quick. I definitely want to visit Singapore. And I also found out that recently the Oriental Express was brought back into service since pre-COVID. And so there's a train that goes through Malaysia and you end in Singapore. So that's going to be on my bucket list.
This is fantastic. Oh, Mayor Guerrero, go ahead. Yeah, where we want to visit and why. Yes. Hi, welcome.
Too many places. Oh, thank you so much. I have too many places on my list. I've been to Italy, and a place that I'm interested in going back to is Dubai. I have to say there are so many beautiful sites when I was at COP28 that I felt like I missed out on. There's so much happening out there. And yeah, definitely want to check Dubai once again. Have it on my bucket list still. So that's the venue I want to check out.
Yeah. Beautiful. And as everyone's going around, I want to go there too. I want to go there too. It's so hard to pick just one place. So for the exercise, of course, I'm gonna settle on Mexico City because I had heard it is such a great futuristic, just a great place to go see, and that really inspired me. So I look forward to doing that as well. And I'm adding all of your lists, and Hokkaido, Japan will be on my wife's list. She loves lavender, so that's a great choice as well. All right. Well, beautiful. It's great to see everybody again. And I missed the last meeting, so I look forward to hearing about some things that happened later on in this session about last meeting. But before we get started, let's ground ourselves again in our shared values, which we've identified over the course of previous meetings. We can get that slide up when we have a chance. Awesome. There we go. Okay. So we could just take a moment and look at those. I don't think we'll need to read them all, but. Okay, and then we have the community agreements that we created from these values. Fantastic. Okay. So I want to make sure that, our work today honors those community agreements. And now I'm going to turn to Casey if we can talk about maybe what's overview of today's meeting.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Chair Soon. Okay, so just a reminder of where we are in the bigger process of SACOG's Race, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative. So this started like in earnest in 2022 when the board adopted a racial equity statement of change commitment, and then followed through on that to develop a racial equity action plan really for the last almost 2 years. Actually, officially 2 years now, we have been implementing and monitoring that racial equity action plan. And so we are today at this point of looking at what kind of amendments, what kind of updates we should make to it so that starting in 2025, we can do kind of the next 2 years of implementation on it. And what that means about today, just a recap so that we're all on the same page about what's happened since September. At that meeting, the working group started to do a little like some assessment. Okay, what were our goals? What kind of progress have we made? And we broke out into groups based on the operations goals of the Racial Equity Action Plan, the programs goals, and the board practices goals. And from that meeting, we actually had additional work happening in October. There was a group of staff and working group members who met to dig in more on what could we do with programs in the next 2 years, and then a group that met to talk about what can we do with board practices over the next 2 years. And then staff on the operations side had taken all that they had heard and learned from the working group to actually start to make some updates on goals and objectives. So that's where we are now. So today, what we want to do is have the working group focusing on really what could the working group do over the next 2 years to help make more progress towards these goals. And therefore it'll turn into like what objectives, right? What are the things that need to be done to make progress towards those goals? Looking ahead, what will come out of this meeting is enough information that staff can draft any updates to goals and objectives that's really going to be based on the conversations that this group has been having over the last few months, as well as a lot of staff assessment. And we'll bring those to you for your December 6th meeting to review. And we hope that you will then finalize those and recommend those to the SACOG board so that at its December meeting, the SACOG board can adopt those updated goals and objectives. So a lot of work we're in the midst of.
Thank you, Casey. And absolutely, there has been a lot of work that's taken place. And, you know, I've often done these slides where, you know, where we're at, where we've been and where we're going. And so before we dive into the where we're going piece, I thought, we all thought it'd be great to take a look back at all the things that have been accomplished. And I'm glad Chair Jennings showed up in this particular moment in time, because I feel like, Chair Jennings, you have been such a fantastic leader through it all, and it's just perfect that you would be here to lead us as we just about to start talking about what's going to go on.
Great, great. So this is the opportunity for us to celebrate? Yeah? Okay, so I think we have some slides. Good, we do. Yeah. REI Successes 2023. Apologize in advance for being tardy and being a little late. I just came back from a crime summit for the city of Sacramento and the Sacramento City Police Department, where we did the same thing. We bragged about the things that we've accomplished over the last year and the things that we want to do going forward. So it was a wonderful summit. Been there since 9 o'clock this morning. So it's made me a little bit late for this. But anyway, we're going to celebrate some major achievements from our work together in these last 2 years. So we're going to start with what we got out of listening and learning from the SACOG board and the many public REI members who joined us for those tours. Okay. So together, as I said, we accomplished a lot. And the first thing that's on that, SACOG deepened its understanding of the region. The first thing that we really were able to accomplish. We have the goal that SACOG board deepen the understanding of how race, ethnicity, income, and geography affect the social outcomes of communities through the Sacramento region. And in the last 2 years, SACOG held board meetings in each of the 6 counties. SACOG, and in 3 of those, we also had tours of each of those counties as well. And in Roseville, we learned about meaningful community engagement within the city and a community-based partner to improve health by listening and learning from residents. So how many were on that trip and remember that trip? Okay.
Some great food in Roseville.
Oh, yeah. So tell me a memory that you have from that trip in Roseville. Something that you remember. Yes. Go ahead.
I remember Mayor Holdershot recommending a sandwich shop. That's what I remember.
That must have been when you were hungry.
Yes, yes.
What about? What else do you remember? Who else?
I remember like the surrounding neighborhood, like houses were built like maybe 1920s or earlier, and they were near the railroads. It was basically a railroad town.
Yeah.
All right, we're talking to staff too, so you guys tell me what you remember.
You had a set.
Yeah, I know, thanks. I remember hearing Supervisor Gore saying that originally the city and their CBO partner went to work in this community thinking that it was a food desert, but by actually listening to and learning from the community members, they realized it's not that it's a food desert, but that they lack safe lighting and sidewalks and other ways of getting around and out of the community to be able to do the things they need to do daily. So that was very profound.
I see you anticipating. I can see, no? Okay, I thought you were ready to pop up. I'm waiting for her last word. I thought I saw you. Anybody else? All right, let's move. Oh, okay.
I was just going to share that we met at the Boys and Girls Club in Roseville, which I thought was a great opportunity to highlight the important work that they do.
For those of us who went through the Boys and Girls Club growing up and also opened up the one here in Sacramento, it's so important to have gone to there because that's where you start learning about leadership, how to get along with others, being able to play fairly in the sandbox. I mean, there's so many lessons that you learn at the Boys and Girls Club and other after-school organizations like that. And so it was really a good place to be. And so for me, it had fond memories.
Chair Jennings, just goes, because you've got the slide up there of Supervisor Gore. I just remember when she started her presentation on the core neighborhoods and the work that the Health Education Council had done. She said, what do you think of when you think of Roseville? You think white and wealthy, right? And I think That is, and then she went into all of the inequities that exist in the core neighborhoods and around the old railroad station. And so I think the idea, which a theme I think we're going to hear again through the ad hoc report outs and into next year, is there are inequities and disparities across the entire 6-county region. And if we just have a sort of a simple lens on this, we may only see one place. But I think what that did to kick off our board meetings and the rotating board meetings, right, is it went to a place that I think a lot of people have preconceived notions about, even if you're not from there. And we dug into the struggles and the challenges, as Casey was saying earlier, and even also what, you know, all of us, right, as either the practitioners or the elected officials think, well, we think we know the solution. We think we know the answer here. And as Casey said, that was the profound thing there, kind of saying like, oh, I guess actually I thought I knew what your challenge was and what the answer is, but maybe not so much until I listened.
Any other comments on Roseville? Getting ready to take you to Yuba City. Are you ready? All right, let's go to Yuba City, where we learned about how infill development opportunities and mobility hubs can look different and achieve important local and regional goals. In Woodland, we learned about the importance of the agriculture and the ag tech sectors to the local and regional economies. Then we went to El Dorado County, where we learned the unique challenges and opportunities of agritourism. I've never said that word before. Did I say it right?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, good. All right,
Farm
new word from my
Farm to
dictionary.
fork.
All right. And rural transportations. And in Maryville, we learn about its long and vibrant history and future infill opportunities. Any memories on Marysville and El Dorado and?
Marysville, the Bach High Temple.
Ah,
Yeah, because normally they only open it in March for the festival.
uh-huh,
And it was nowhere near March that we went to see this.
gotcha. I see somebody else.
I think it was, El Dorado was a great opportunity. It was the last site visit Tico did. I won't say it was the best class.
Sounds like you said it already. It's okay.
I think it's interesting to hear you say that you've never said agritourism before. I think that's what I observed from some of the SACOG board members that were on that trip in Apple Hill, the Apple Hill region. Weren't aware of what opportunities are available beyond the big 3 ranches on Carson Road, the main Apple Hill ranches that everybody goes to. So I think it was good for us to kind of expose that and open up that opportunity. But we also talked a lot about, what does rural equity look like in El Dorado County and Placer County? Roseville might appear to be white and wealthy. El Dorado County looks to be the same way if you look at a lot of the different metrics that are used to measure that. But we have those, aging seniors that are geographically dispersed throughout the county and rural parts of the county that aren't in these, concentrated, dense parts of a city core that need those transportation services. So it was good to take some of the folks who haven't used the term agritourism before or weren't aware of what that really means in the region, and just share that with them in person, certainly.
What was news to me, like, really was that they grew pears out there at one time.
Right.
Yeah, I was just thinking, oh, Cortland.
The largest pear producing region in the country until the pear blight happened. Yeah.
And that happened when?
Long before I was born, in the 40s and 50s, I think. Yeah.
I think after World War II,
Yeah.
right?
I'm gonna say something positive and not as positive. I really enjoyed going to Woodland. I only lived 20 minutes from Woodland, and there were places that we went to that I had never been to, and one of them was that kind of ag. I don't remember the name of it, but it was kind of like an idea crucible. It had so much availability for science and kitchens and everything that you would need to kind of get a concept from beginning through all the stages of testing. And that really excited me. And oh, we need to go back. We need to see that again. I'd love my council to go and see that. I did have, I really enjoyed Placerville, and I enjoyed the apples and apple farm, and the idea that instead of having, farming, the things that you farm going to market, having kind of the market come to you. And I, you know, and I really, it resonates for me with the, you know, I-80 development and so forth. But when the presenter presented about, I don't remember her name, Placerville, and she was giving the history of Placerville, and she talked about Hangtown, but, and then I kind of mentioned it as a colloquial expression, and then just moved on to, then we called it Placerville, but didn't address that this was a place of vigilante justice that affected people of color, and others. And it just, the way that it was skimmed over in the presentation, there were several of us that were next to each other that were really kind of offended by it, but there was no chance to say anything because she just moved right on. And there were other people that were just like, ow, like maybe just not say it was just a colloquial, nice, like a little colloquial term. There's a history there, and it was vigilante justice, and just name it and then move on. I think that that's what we're here for. And I think we just name it and move on, not gloss it over.
Director Lauren, just out of curiosity, because I wasn't there, was it more, was there a sense of shame associated with that, or trying to avoid, what did you sense?
I think she had a very polished, high level presentation, but it didn't touch on the truths when it came to something that could be offensive to an audience of many races. It was sort of
That glossed over.
whitewashed,
Yeah.
if you will. Yeah. So, and you know, I'm glad I was there, and I'm, you know, I really enjoyed all of it, and I, you know, but I think it could have been presented better for people that are involved in race, equity, and inclusion.
Absolutely.
That's my truth today.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, as a public employee of an agency, you'll never hear me refer to Placerville as this old Hangtown, publicly or otherwise. It is a very divisive thing that has, it's challenging in Placerville. There are people who find it to be acceptable and have identified the history to be something that they can get behind and isn't tied to race or, any kind of racial inequity or injustice, but it is a hot button
Yeah.
term. There are businesses downtown that have, there's the original business that has a dummy hanging from a noose. And it's directly across from the only historic, it's the only hotel in the city of Placerville. And I have had family members come and stay at that hotel and open their window, and there's a man hanging from a noose right across the street. And these are not people of color, but they're people that are kind of socially aware and offended by that. So that's an issue that Placerville needs to address sometime, and it has been fought over for years. You'll see the sign, the welcome sign to Placerville says Old Hangtown on the very bottom of it. You'll see that the main shopping district in Placerville on Broadway is, what is it called? I've blanked it out of my mind. I don't ever use the term, but there's a noose on the sign. It's a real challenge, especially as a public staff to an agency, trying to navigate that and, not express my personal beliefs, publicly. That's not a place to do that.
I really appreciate your comment. I guess maybe I'm not as articulate as I'd like to be on this, but I think that the way that she expressed it, like, yeah, Hangtown was our original name, but when we wanted to, grow, we just had to, we changed that colloquialism. Like, there's a little chunk there that could have, there's a, like, maybe there were 2 cents that could have been said that we're like, okay, like, we're all with you. We all have stuff in our city's history. We just, talked about the Japanese monument to our past and what we did, but what our city did. I just think it could have been completed, not glossed over.
So when we go back, I'm gonna take you with me so I can get my complete history. You all right with that?
When you come to Winners, or Okay.
When we go to Placerville.
All right.
I'll go to Winters
Well,
and
all
I'll
right.
go to Placerville with you so you can give me the complete history. Because this is the first I've ever heard of this. I really
Oh.
was not aware of any of this, so.
Oh,
So
I
this is
didn't know.
helping me tremendously and I love history,
what's
good and bad.
Placerville's great. And I guess the other thing from the tour is that I've only ever been to the downtown. So when we took the bus tour and we saw that all the stores were in another area, that was so much like Winters. It was like, oh yeah, there's two economies. It's the tourist economy and everybody else. And so I really enjoyed it. So I guess I got a lot out of Placerville, right?
There you go. There you go. Well, how much did you get out of Yuba City, Yuba County? We learned about the positive impact of SACOG's funding program and technical assistance to a rural disadvantaged community. And then we went to Sacramento, right? Where I've called home since 1986. South Sacramento's a big area. We learned about the positive impact of SACOG's funding and project prioritization actions on mobility in a historically disinvested community. You guys remember South Sacramento? Anybody? What's your fondest memory?
We went to, like, Fruit Rich Shopping Center, I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah. And do you remember the organization that?
Not familiar.
La Familia? Yeah, and the great things that they're doing in that community, adding a whole new building that the city was instrumental in helping to fund. That's, I forget all the details of it, but it's gonna be an opportunity center for disadvantaged individuals who have worked with La Familia, but now they're gonna have more services than ever before. So it changes the whole look of South Sacramento, especially in that particular area, in the Fruit Ridge area. So.
Chair Jennings.
Yes.
If I may, but so maybe two things that stuck out to me there was one, very impressed with the bus driver on this particular trip, sort of navigating the neighborhoods, doing it well. But I think the thing that impressed me even more was the role that La Familia played in community engagement, right? So as opposed to sort of staff leading discussions around sort of neighborhood improvement, sort of empowering and resourcing that organization to have those conversations in community, and sort of the examples and that were provided in the multi-purpose room where we had lunch, and lunch was really good too. That was really, it was great to see sort of concrete example of that at work. Thank you.
And all that work is being led by Executive Director of La Familia Council Center, Rachel Rios? Yeah, Rachel Rios, who I've had a long history with in Sacramento, and her work is just incredible, just making such a difference in that particular community. They even took over an elementary school that the Sac City Unified School District had shut down, and they took it over and have turned that school into a community center for the entire community there in that area. So they're doing great things there. Any other questions about South Sacramento? Okay. So our most recent SACOG board workshop, in our most recent SACOG board workshop, we learned about pedestrian safety and the crisis that's in our region. Also, how our funding programs can be used by our communities to creatively and quickly create safer streets for pedestrians. How important is that? Creating safer streets for pedestrians.
We don't have daily carnage. Daily carnage on the road.
Yeah. I mean, it is such an important thing that we do. Yes, but you got more?
Yeah, because I currently sit on Delta Highway Coalition. It's but the lead group is like neighboring county, Ville Vista and Solano. But Highway 12, it was like part of it is in Sacramento County. 160 is in Sacramento County, and there's carnage on the daily on those roads.
It's also eye-opening to see how much disparate impact it is to Native Americans, African American community, Latino community. Sure.
We went through a process of redistricting, and in the redistricting, I ended up with a community that I had never had before. And the young girl who got hit by a car on her bike going to school on Sutterville and Meade has caused us to totally redesign that area so that no other child ever gets hit on that road. And the car was doing everything that they should have been doing, going the speed limit and all of that kind of stuff. It was just poor design as far as a young person trying to get across the street to get to McClatchy High School, and cars and the golf course and everything else that was there. And so, you know, that now costs us to do a redesign so that we can put a roundabout there that can make sure that that never happens again. So SACOG has been involved all the way with all of these kinds of things.
One thing I would add to that, you know, coming from a transportation planning agency, we've worked with Caltrans for years on projects where, you know, Caltrans will actually come in and give you they place a dollar value on fatalities, right? Once they hit a certain threshold of fatalities in the corridor, they'll come in and fix something. We saw that with the US 50 corridor from essentially Placerville up to Camino. But you know, as we develop these funding programs through SACOG, you know, active transportation program, whatever the funding source might be, it might be nice to kind of step back away from that, you know, requiring us to hit a threshold when we know there's a safety concern already, to make those improvements before we have to get to that, you know, horrific number of you know, dollar value on fatality. I think there are critical bike and pedestrian improvements that we know we need now that, you know, fortunately we haven't had a major loss of life, but it's only a matter of time until it happens, and it would be great to work that into, you know, safety as a priority in a lot of those funding programs with bike and ped.
Yes.
So, yeah, West Sacramento, working with SACOG, is making some significant improvements. And we just are adding now, on our roads, some little medians that are catching everybody's attention, hoping that we can slow down, the thoroughfares where people are driving beyond the speed limit. And chatting with Chris White, who is working with SACOG and wearing a new hat, she researched it and shared with me that the locations of where these medians are located are as a result of a good study that was done showing where most of the accidents in the city had occurred. So just trying to keep our pedestrians safe. Just last week, though, after adding this, we've had one fatality. You know, and I looked at it and just keep looking at that location of the fatality and I think what goes on in our mind is what could we have done to prevent that? Unfortunately, the youth was only 20 years old, and he fell. But I still keep thinking there's much more we can do. I think the family says, well, he fell. Well, I'm like, no, I think he could have had more space if he would have fallen and it would have been safe. With that, and then on the same day, another hit and run of a person crossing where there is a pedestrian crossing on a scooter. So, you know, as we look at those that are riding their bicycles, you know, we just encourage them to be on their bicycles and their scooters. We're doing all we can to build those safe trails and even have stop signs. It's the biggest complaint. Martha, they just fly through those stop signs. You know, sometimes I wonder, well, are speed bumps the answer? Because my staff are saying no, but is that the answer? So it's constantly in my mind trying to figure out how to keep everybody moving more slowly in those areas where people are transitioning to using, you know, other modes of transportation, but trying to keep them safe while they're out.
Well, we also learned that day that, you know, with the quick builds, we don't have to spend a whole lot of money to try to, you know, prove out these concepts to keep people safer. And I think Director Jennings, that same day, you emphasized, or you asked the question, Mr. Coyle's answered, which was the board was a learning body. We're a learning body. And I think this working group too is also a learning body. And so from all these different visits, and you know, we can go to the next slide, all the different visits, working all that, we created principles of meaningful community engagement, you know, when we reflected back on all these things.
and how we can show up in successful community living. We're all awake. So, with that, oh yeah, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I didn't know if we were gonna talk about dangerous by design, but the dangerous by design presentation was deeply meaningful for me, especially because in Winters, we're about to embark on this, I don't know, 5-acre housing, mixed housing. It looks like it could be dangerous by design, or at least discouraging by design to ride your bike or get to school in any other way besides getting in a car and going down 128, a highway. So I'm taking that information with me and I'm carrying it onto the dais, and I will definitely be trying to get the best outcome for the community so that it's walkable and bikeable. I really appreciated that. It was like a mushroom cloud in my brain of safety. I didn't see things that way before. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, turn up. Well, we're just recapturing on the principles of meaningful community engagement from all that learning, and then how we're going to use that advice on programs and help get obtain successful board actions. So we've got, with all that shared meaningful community engagement, the REI working group gave important advice for 2 SACOG funding programs. Those programs have been set up for success. The Engage, Empower, and Implement Grant Program is SACOG's first program to fund equitable and community engagement that creates community-defined projects. And we have our regional funding round grants that are give out money for transportation projects. This group's work on meaningful engagement, staff use that to develop the equity criteria that are now part of the funding program. SACOG board approved that program last month, and late next year, we're going to kick off a call for applications. So I think these are 2 meaningful ways that all this work will culminate, and we'll be able to literally see future projects that work on the ground. It's the word I'm looking for. Basically a physical manifestation of all these concepts that we've been talking about, working towards.
Okay. And then, next slide. The REI working group also gave some really important support to SACOG staff in 2 big ways. We gave important feedback and input on SACOG's public outreach and engagement grant program back in March. You remember? That shaped the way staff is planning public engagement for the future. We also put a lot of time into regional equity indicators, and now SACOG is going to have a robust dashboard of indicators so that everyone can monitor the region's success, which I think is so important. So I want to get your comments on those 2 things as well. Noran?
I'm just gonna jump in. I know I'm staff, but I just want to
Look,
to
staff
really
is
underscore the
equal here.
point.
You got an equal voice at the table.
I am staff, and I want to underscore the point that Chair Jennings made about supporting staff. The work that you all did with us, all of this was so important. And I think in 2 kind of course, and everywhere in between, but in ways where we brought things where we're like, we want to do this, and you said, hold on. Let's really think about that. Let's take a pause. An example is our public outreach and engagement and the grant program, really thinking about, we wanted to carry that forward. And we heard from, especially our community partners, really think about overtaxation, really think about, are your partners ready to do this right now? We are in the middle of mobility zones, all this work. Think about it so you can sustain it. And then on the other side, I think, especially for the funding round framework, we had learned a lot, and we came with some really core ideas, and you said, this is the right direction. Here's a little bit of tweaking, but this is great. This is where you need it to be. This is authentic. This is meaningful. This is deep. So I just want to say, on both ends, where sometimes we come with ideas, we're like, we think it's great. And you say, yes, keep going. And then you say, hold on, really think about it. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you. Other comments? Thoughts? So I think the next thing for us is what can we accomplish? What more can we accomplish together in the next 2 years? I mean, like, we've done a lot. And to me, I wanted to have an opportunity to kind of brag for a minute, you know, kind of puff my chest out and say, here's what we did together. I think, you know, we've done that for the last 10, 15, 20 minutes or so. But the question is, because we haven't gotten to where I know we are capable of getting to, we haven't reached our full potential.
Recording in
The question
progress.
is, are you ready to be able to do more? What more can we add to the table over the next 2 years? Right? So I think there was a report out from the ad hoc groups, right?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
So, as I'd mentioned at the beginning, to tee this meeting up, there's been a lot of work happening on the operations and programs and board practices pieces of the Racial Equity Action Plan. So I'd like to ask Eric Johnson, who's our Deputy Executive Director for Operations, to just give you a brief report out on what's been happening to ready the operations activities for the next couple years, and then we'll go to the next two.
Sure. Thanks, Casey. Yeah, so at our last meeting, we did the breakout groups, and it was really helpful to hear from a few of the members of this group about kind of, you know, what we've been doing and some reactions to some of our thoughts. Because, you know, operations a bit different than the board practices in the program. We did not have an ad hoc meeting come together, but what we've done kind of based on the input and what we've heard over the last series of meetings is we're really focused on the 3 goals that we have and how the goals are enduring. I think they make sense for what you need as an organization to achieve racial equity. But really the objectives we had before were about setup activities. And so now that we've established the foundation, our work moving forward is really about what do those objectives look like for an ongoing program. And so we're looking at how we modify our objectives to focus on training, inclusive both hiring, but also ongoing employment practices. And then our procurement, how can we, as an agency that has very technical work, with a limited kind of number of people who work in the space, still try to achieve more people coming in and having, you know, greater inclusion in terms of who we contract with to do work, but also just expand the pool and the knowledge that we can bring in to help us do our work when we do contract out for things. So we'll be coming back when we bring the rest of the plan with some things that you'll see in terms of operations and how it's evolving.
Great. Any questions of Eric? Thank you, Eric. And we will now turn to programs. We've got Maria and Raul. I understand that they've met with some of the SACOG staff to vet ideas about what the SACOG programs should focus on. I'd love to hear from both of you.
So I'll kick it off and then Raul also help summarize it. We had a great.
Could you turn your mic on, please? That's okay.
I forget. I know. This is so, we met on the programmatic piece of this, and nice big group. It was, I think, just Raul and I from the working group, and then a number of SACOG staff. And what we did was we talked a little bit about what support and technical assistance approaches would best serve the local agencies. And in the programmatic goals of Goal 2 and Goal 3. So Goal 2 being increasing funding for programs and projects that prioritize REI and or specifically engage underrepresented and underserved communities in the SACOG region. And then program Goal 3, which is SACOG supports and learns from member and local partner agencies incorporating racial equity best practices into their planning work. So those were the 2 things that we addressed in this ad hoc meeting. And so the first really that we talked about was, you know, how do we best support them and how do we measure, right, the success of it? And so we talked a lot about how difficult it is to just jump in and start in a place where you don't exactly know, you know, you're just sort of guessing, you know, you sort of know maybe in your gut, anecdotally, you know, spiritually, where the agencies are, but to really be able to go back and measure the success of a program, it really needs to start with something that is more data driven. And so we talked a lot about that's, surveys and other ways to measure where, what these agencies need, and how that would play into this. And that sometimes it's difficult to think about that. It feels very big, how do you survey? And then, if you're on a timeline and you want to implement things, that seems to slow things down. But we talked about how important a step that is, because if you are going to go back and measure the success of a program, you have to know where you started. And also, you don't want to just be going with a shotgun approach. You want to go laser approach. So we talked a lot about the value of that, surveying agencies, listening to them, because it's not all about the data, right? So, making sure that you're also getting that anecdotal feedback, pilot testing things, making sure that you're doing the test and learns, because sometimes you think you know what you're doing, but you go out and it's okay. It's an experiment. These things, what do we say? There are no mistakes, right? Just learnings. And so, trying something and then evolving it as it goes. And then designing some tools that really specifically help people based on what you're hearing. And, we talked a little bit about the toolkits that can be very helpful for people, and then maybe even using new media. In an age where people aren't really reading, I don't subscribe to that. I love to read, and I hope most people still do. But in an age where people also like to have the videos, and we saw, one of the directors paint this beautiful picture for us in the last meeting of the phones as fireflies, and so that those images can be very powerful in terms of helping people and assisting them in laying out these programs. So we had a very wide-ranging conversation. I would say this first goal, we probably spent maybe like 30 or 40 minutes on and talking about it. But really, I think to summarize it, we talked a lot about the data. We talked a lot about making sure that we're hitting our marks. We talked about evolving programs and how it's okay to start something and evolve it if it's not working. And then also using some new and perhaps creative ways to help the agencies reach the goals. So I think I covered it.
Any questions from Maria before we move on? Sure. Raul.
Okay, thanks. And just second part of the conversation was about, well, first off, maybe before we get there, I just want to, I agree with Maria that we had a fair number of staff there, and just want to thank them and applaud them for continuing to solicit feedback and being open to it, because they've also got their own set of experiences, right? They're with the various jurisdictions and the agencies, and so they have a perspective too. And so through this work, and so just appreciate them reaching out to us. And so the second part was about evaluating sort of the progress made as well, right? And so something that Maria said around sort of testing. And so maybe I'm just going to nerd out just for a second, because I love evaluation, is maybe thinking about consideration on focusing on developmental evaluation. And so the reason I say that is because in evaluation, historically, there's like two types. You've got a formative evaluation. So if you do things a certain way, you can expect certain kinds of outcomes that you then track through a summative evaluation, right? So you've got a model, and if you do the model, you put in all the ingredients, you're going to get, X outcome, right? But it strikes me that this work is iterative and it's dynamic and doesn't fit into a model. And so SACOG and its agencies and its partners are testing things out. And so with developmental evaluation, maybe there's two tracks where, you're looking at sort of the rollout of the supports that SACOG is providing to the partner agencies to operationalize the REI principles into the grant making and into its, I don't know, maybe I'm making this up. It's influence making. I'm making up a word. Influence making activities, right? But so what was it that was originally planned? What changed? Why did that change? What was that in response to? And how did how did we land on those pivots so that we track, document, track, sort of learn the history of this initiative programmatically. And then two, maybe begin to document the emerging sort of system level practices within the agencies, within sort of the jurisdictional boundaries of SACOG and the extent to which they're, now infusing REI principles in their own work, and what's beginning to stick, and what's that about, and what's not beginning to stick, and what's that about too, and that might be helpful as SACOG, continues to support and promote sort of REI in the communities, right? So I guess taking a holistic look through developmental evaluation of its own sort of programmatic work, but then also looking to see, what are the systemic changes within the agencies that then maybe down the road that there's you look at some causal pathways that these are things that influence health and wellness, community connection, safety, and prosperity in the areas that we're trying to affect. But Maria, did I get that right, or is something I missed? Yeah.
Any questions for Raul? Okay. Casey, not seeing Michael here, that means I'm gonna come to you.
Sure.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm gonna see if Ami would be willing to report out on the last group, and then which
board
was
practices?
on board practices.
Okay.
And I do want to acknowledge that Chair Jennings, you were there too. So if you want to add to it, and James as well, but go ahead.
All right. It's just have to do this, so,
Yeah. Thanks for being a team
yeah,
sport.
no worries.
You're the best we got. There's no question.
Yeah, all right, well, thank you. Oh,
It's
thank you.
on, yep.
Perfect. Let's see, I would say, let me frame this too, that I remember from our conversation around supporting board capacity and training, was that it really is embedded and that it's ongoing and it's throughout a board member's cycle, right? For beginning, during, and post. So the onboarding of a new board member was as a cohort, the idea, so there's peer learning. Also, you can leverage the different experiences and how long board members may be on, new, and those who are more experienced, so they can learn from each other. So that peer aspect was there. So the idea about training happening as a cohort, using feedback from other previous trainings that have happened within SACOG. If there's things that you don't need to reinvent the wheel, if there were best practices that you want to capture or emerging practices, like bring that into the board training, and build off the work that has already previously happened. And then onboarding of new members, making sure that they're grounded in shared definitions and concepts that are currently being used. We know we use a lot of acronyms, we use a lot of terminology, so really helping board members have a grounding, even if that means giving them a glossary that they would have at their meeting. So as terms are used or as acronyms are used, it really can help with communication and getting people grounded in the work right away. Let's see, the supporting the board members, onboarding in place, other structures to support members' ongoing learning, concepts to the future, offer one-on-one and questions and answers, to create opportunities for learning and relationship building. And also the last thing I would say here, and anybody else can chime in, is there was quite a lot of conversation around leveraging the tours and really helping that be a way of learning, compare and contrast, grounding, and how those could be leveraged to further a board member's learning, whether they're new or experienced. And feel free to add. I think I captured the
that was
sentiment of what I remember.
No, excellent job.
And then I just want to ask if James, you want to speak at all to the discussion about the second goal, which is about the board including racial equity impacts in its decisions. There was quite a bit of time we spent on that too.
There was quite a bit. Yeah, and I think, again, maybe previewing a little bit of the feedback we've heard from the ad hocs, and then coming back to you, right, with some changes and updates on the REAP kind of goals. So goal 2 on board practices, the board includes racial equity impacts in its triple bottom line decisions. And I think, first of all, I think we, as a staff, certainly even the way I see it, I've been hearing it, is we probably have to get a little bit more specific about that. My sense is if I asked any board member, how do we get racial equity impacts more in your triple bottom line decisions, there'd be a pause. That said, I think we actually have been, not unlike what Director Soon and Jennings kind of walked through. Dr. Jennings, you walked through in the sort of the brag, like what have we been doing the last 2 years? There's a lot that we have learned. There's a lot that we have learned on this topic of basically how to embed racial equity in our programs. You know, for example, in our mobility zones work, which, you know, we've come to this body and this working group a little bit on, we've actually allowed different counties to define equity, sort of almost like using their own tool and taking the values and what we hear to then put an emphasis on the data, which then pops up different neighborhoods and different places, which is like incredibly powerful, right? Idea being, it's not a one size fits all. And I think that really, again, just sort of not go, because there's a lot I can say about this and I want to say about it, but I think what we're learning as a staff is that we're going to come to the full board and talk about equity and racial equity, cannot feel like it is a one size fits all. It can't feel like it's copy and paste and that we don't understand your jurisdictions and your communities and your neighborhoods. But if we can do something that feels a little co-created, feels a little bit from the bottom up, the ground up, that feels a little bit like it fits, it's flexible, it doesn't lose the focus on racial disparities, but it is flexible enough, that's where I think we're beginning to see, you know, which, by the way, requires a lot more work, right? But is meaningful work and important work. So I'd say that's kind of where we've landed on that one.
Great.
And
Go ahead.
I was just going to add, building off your comments too, was in terms of the tours, I think that's how that conversation was, there was a bridge. Because there was a lot of I think a really great suggestion made about including residents in a very active way in the tours. So that learning and that understanding is deepened by board members and bringing that to the conversations around how does racial equity, how is that seen in the different jurisdictions in different places? So just wanted to add that element.
Question over here.
Yeah, sorry, I had to do a little multitasking, so I'm joining now. But what I wanted to just kind of share too on the processes or the board practices goal is that it's also so much related to the process, right? I think we talked about the Engage, Empower, Implement project a little bit earlier. I think one of the biggest lessons we learned as staff is that the process is really critical to weighing out what the benefits are going to be for it when it comes to equity. And I really want to highlight something that Director Jennings said in that meeting was really looking at creating parameters for a region that we then get to sort of adjust accordingly to each jurisdiction and each project and program. So it's really looking about these broader processes that make everyone feel seen and that we're looking at the uniqueness of each jurisdiction and then taking from these bigger perspectives and adjusting accordingly. So the EEI has just been a really I think a good example of how as staff, we try to really look at that big picture and then begin to tailor it down. And obviously there's a lot of improvements we can do in the next cycles, but it's the process that's, I think, really important to highlight.
Great. Thanks for remembering what I said. Any other questions or thoughts on what was presented?
I want to thank James for, you know, acknowledging that, you know, this can't be a one size fits all approach. It's a very diverse region. There are, you know, disadvantaged cohorts across the region of different races, different economic groups, all sorts of folks. I think, you know, there's multiple facets to this work. You know, the STACOG is doing their work internally, trying to include REI work within how they operate their agency, how they bring their board up to speed and function as a policy board. And then there's the side that, you know, as a partner agency, I will be more focused on, not that I think that work isn't as important, but the money that is programmed to projects, you know, the projects that get delivered to improve the quality of life for these cohorts that we've identified, you know, whether it's El Dorado County or, you know, West Sacramento, wherever. You know, I think it's really important as time goes on for us to look back and determine, did we invest in the right way? I did, the active transportation program is on its 6th or 7th cycle now. And disadvantaged communities have been a focus since the first cycle. And, I know of projects that were built that didn't improve the upward mobility of folks in any way, shape, or form. They were just sexy projects that were in a disadvantaged community. I think if we had invested those same dollars in subsidized transit or something else, mobility options would have been greatly improved and quality of life would have improved as well. So, it would be nice to look back after whatever number of years that we've been doing this work and just kind of do a ground check of, is this really what these people need to improve the quality of life in their community? That's something I think we haven't done much of, and it would be very helpful for us as transportation planning agencies long term.
James, I see you.
Yeah, if I could just build off of that comment as you're saying that, and I was thinking back to as we onboard different board members and creating this culture of, are we creating an environment where an all ships or all boats rise environment, or are we focusing on one or a small handful of boats? So I think that'll be good for new board members, when they come on board to adopt that culture, the all boats rise culture. There you go.
Danielle.
Sorry, folks. I have to move us forward onto our next item so that we can have some good spacious time with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So next item will be the preview of the SACOG's 2025 work plan, and we have none other than Casey to bring that to us. Gives us an overview of what SACOG will be working on for the next year.
Yes, thank you, Chair Jennings. So I think what we'll do is I'm going to try to just give us all just a little bit of a look ahead into next year. And then I want to hand it over to James to put forth some ideas based on that work of how we think the REI working group could help, again, to help us to make progress on our goals. So we're going to try to do this in a way that is informative and it's not like throwing a lot of stuff at you, because we're trying to save time for you to then discuss really what you think the REI working group should focus on. Okay, so here I go. Maybe. Okay, so I'm going to highlight some big programs that SACOG is going to be focused on, both in terms of resources, and it's going to be in front of the SACOG board over the next year, and it'll go into 2026, but these are I want to make some tangible examples for you. So one, our blueprint, the region's long-range transportation and land use plan. So the REI working group, as Alex said, had provided some really helpful feedback on how we can sustain engagement with CBOs because we have to do public outreach for this plan. Looking ahead in 2025, we have to develop policies for this plan. And so that's a potential place where the working group could weigh in on policies so that we are building in equity in all of those policies. We will also be releasing a draft plan. And so that's kind of a big thing where potentially the REI working group could also really provide some feedback on that. Another program, it's the Mobility Zones program. This is a 6-county effort for SACOG to work with community-based organizations, local governments, and some of our kind of regional government partners to co-create equitable, clean, shared mobility solutions in communities, in equity priority communities, places where there are mobility inequities, there are gaps in what people need for that upward mobility. So this program is kind of just really launching, so we could come to this group for feedback on how those areas are identified, guidance on engaging the board, because it's such an equity program. Really, the decision making has been designed to be in the hands of all of those groups, but it is something that SACOG would ultimately need to adopt. This group could, provide support in community and public agency engagement because it does touch every single county and community within. And there's also a point where we have to prioritize projects, and so we could be looking to this group for guidance there. So I'm giving you just flavors of things, right? The Engage, Empower, Implement program that Rosie runs, that this working group has provided just really valuable feedback on. And we're really excited. The board's about to approve a list of awardees, but next year we have, we could be coming to this group for guidance on how we assist those grantees in successfully implementing their grants. We could be looking for help on guidance or measuring impact of those awards. And then we know there'll be lessons learned, so we could be coming to this group for feedback on that. The regional funding program is the big bucket of money we have for transportation. So the board, again, just adopted the program guidelines. As we said, you gave really valuable feedback to us that is now incorporated into those guidelines. But next year we have to set funding targets for the different pieces of the program. We need to provide technical assistance to local agencies because the program guidelines are very different than what they've worked with in the past. And we will ultimately be doing a call for applications. So those are places where we could come to this working group for help to make that successful. And then maybe this is last. Green Means Go is a program of both funding and technical assistance to our local agencies to accelerate equitable infill development in locally defined infill areas. We could be coming to this group for guidance and feedback on how we work with community-based organizations in an ongoing way, feedback on community-led planning and design principles, and then also support in convening and connecting our public agency partners because that is an ongoing need for this program. And then, all right, and here's the other big rock we have, the regional monitoring report. This group provided just great guidance and feedback on equity indicators. And so we're going to put our first report out now, but we need some advice on rolling that out and how we can apply, the monitoring report itself and all of the different indicators. We're going to do an annual report. So we could be getting guidance from this group on what that second one should be. So lots of opportunities there. We're going to skip the Q&A for right now, and I'm going to turn it over to James so that he can kind of summarize where we see potential areas for the working group to focus.
Okay, great. Thanks, Casey. Can you just help me on when do we need to head into discussion? How much time do I have? 5 minutes? 2 minutes? Yes. -3 minutes? Okay. So we wanted to get your feedback today, get your thinking hats on, and give us, I will just say, we can't necessarily do all of these things the next 2 years. So really what we're looking for you is to sort of really put your thumb on the, if I had to pick, if I had to pick a couple of these things, and maybe we've skipped over this, but really important, we really value this REI working group as staff, and we don't think we're done, obviously, and finished. So we want to continue in some way, shape, or form. So the question then is what, right? And if our 2021-22 was develop a racial equity statement of commitment, change, and a racial equity action plan, the last 2 years have been implement the action plan. Then the question is, it seems to us, at least initially, are there some things that, like Casey just went through, that are maybe more focus areas, right? Like drilling down a little bit. And so we wanted to give you Casey's overview of all the work next year. And so I'm going to walk you through five possible focus areas. All right. You can't vote for all 5. Just wanted to say that again. All right. So first, help shape SACOG's entire board engagement and education on REI related topics. I mentioned a little bit of this, right? In terms of the ad hoc group feedback. A reminder to all of you, I've been told there's an election next week, and that means we're going to have some new people in local office as well as other places. And we'll probably get, at least with the retirements on the board, at least 5 new board members, and we could get as many, we hope you all come back, we could get as many as 8 new board members. That point is, we'll have new board members. We're going to have probably the youngest tenured board, certainly in my time here. So we're going to have a lot of people who were not around, maybe almost all of our board, starting next January, maybe with the exception of a couple of people here, won't have been there for the last 2020 long range plan update, right? That's a lot of turnover. So shaping that engagement, especially around racial equity topics and REI related topics, helping us figure that out, number one. Second, a little bit of what I was saying earlier on the triple bottom line board practice goal, helping integrate racial equity into specific SACOG programs that'll be developed or launched in the next 2 years. And again, that kind of connects back to some of those things that Casey just walked through. But to be really specific and sort of bounded. Number three, guide SACOG and our partner agencies in developing a six-county pipeline of equitable transportation projects and programs. Casey mentioned the funding round. We've revised the funding round. Woody was the lead on the staff working group. We had a board working group on this, right? We spent 2 years to revise a lot of our transportation grant guidelines. Board just adopted that. They adopted an equity framework as Director Soon and Chair Jennings just said. How can we solicit, encourage, incentivize, support more equitable transportation projects, quick build projects, planning grants, right? How do we get this from a policy into practice? Okay, next slide. Got 2 more. Okay, so fourth is making sure, and again, Casey said you all have been really instrumental in this and very helpful. We put the principles of meaningful community engagement at the beginning of the meeting. How can we ensure that you help us support and integrate meaningful community engagement into all of the work we do, our programs and our projects? We have a long way to go on this still. And then finally, again, tying back to the regional monitoring report. We're about to actually release that in November. We're going to have a board, November 14th full board session on our new regional monitoring report that has more disparity data by race, ethnicity, income, and age than ever before. But you've gotten, all of you, I think, see very different sort of 360 around the data issue and helping us, as Casey said, kind of build on that, build on those data tools and basically being able to show through numbers and through data, quantitative or qualitative, a lot of the issues around racial equity in the region. So there you go. That was as best I could do for 10 minutes. So 5 areas. And again, we'd love to get your quick, your feedback, your thoughts on what would feel like a good place for you all to be digging into next year.
Yeah, and if you could sort of think about both what Casey and what James shared. So those slides that had like, here are the specific areas you might plug in on this particular program, that component of it, but also these broader focus areas. And so maybe to frame up our discussion a little bit more, just curious, like what immediately resonates with you, either in these focus areas or exciting ways to plug in on the programs? Like, what do you like? Ooh, I feel a lot of energy around that, or a lot of interest in jumping into that.
What immediately came to mind for me was focus areas 1 and 5, which have to do around board practices, goals 1 and yeah. And I was wondering if there could be some condensing or if there's overlap. So that was one thought. And then the other thought for me was a question just around number 2 in terms of, I think if I'm looking at, focus area 3, the partner agencies in the development of a 6-county, is it really, I just want to make sure I'm understanding, is it more about the pipeline of equitable transportation projects, not necessarily the partners? The partners are already in place.
Number 3.
It's more about that pipeline.
For number 3.
Mm-hmm. Or is it a little bit of both?
A little bit of both.
Okay. I was just wanting to make sure, because I could see how it could be both, but I could also see that the focus would be on the pipeline piece, but
the partners that develop the projects are already in place, right? I mean, are you thinking more like
like sort of the project sponsors, right? And so again, maybe back to the Engage, Empower, Implement program that we referenced now is coming to the board in November. That whole one of the main thrusts of that program is actually to create new partnerships between community-based organizations and jurisdictions.
Right.
Right? And so when I think of the project sponsors who would say, get the grant are there.
Okay.
And then I think the shaping of that, right, or the partnerships with communities and CBOs, maybe we're still early stages, I would say, on that in the region, trying to help CBOs somewhat shape what those projects are, if that helps, it makes sense.
So that might need to be maybe a little bit teased out a
Sure.
little bit there, just in that focus area, just because you would know where to devote resources and energy. So that's what came to mind. I'm still gonna.
I would
flag.
just, and I'm not trying to put my thumb on the scale here, but one of the, what is this? The true confessions of the transportation world, I'll just speak for myself. It's gonna be a shock to you. Transportation projects take a really long time. So when they take a really long time, that means that what we're building today, we probably had on the books 20, 30 years ago. And we weren't thinking about these things then, right? So that's why the quick build stuff, I think, was really hit a spark with our board, was like, wait, we can do something in 6 months? So that's amazing, right? And that's a little bit of what we're trying to, not just that quick build's the answer, it's how can we maybe question some of the stuff that has historically been in the pipeline? Not to say that's all bad, we want to do some of those things, but also begin to seed new projects and new approaches, especially if they're larger cost infrastructure change, built environment change. Director Jennings, you were talking about Sutterville Road, right? And we have to get in there quick and do something. So how do we help our existing partners, but also some of the new partners to shape some of these projects, because we've got money coming through the SACOG funding rounds in 25 and 26. So that's an opportunity.
Thank you. Ooh, this seems really interesting, or just feedback generally on the focus areas. I have other questions, but we can start there.
I was gonna say the exact same thing. 1 and 5 were the two that I think are most important from my perspective. I think, it's gonna be critical to continue to work with the SACOG board to keep them moving in this direction. With a lot of turnover, it's gonna be very, challenging to bring folks, not just bring folks up to speed, but also keep the folks that are, staying on the board, interested and engaged in this work. And then 5, I think, similar to what I mentioned earlier, looking at kind of the data and analytics behind not just, where these disadvantaged communities are, but, how the investments that SACOG is making is improving the quality of life for those disadvantaged communities. I think the SACOG funding round guidelines, while it's the first iteration, I expect it to change over time. But I think REI is kind of baked into that fairly well, with the help from SACOG staff as we develop that. So I'm not sure that that's really in this first round of funding that necessarily the needs to be the focus of this group. But I think that 1 and 5 really would help move things forward most effectively from my perspective.
Real quick, can we check the phone folks and then have you jump in, Darren? I just realized we've left them hanging possibly. William, Nicole, do y'all have any reflections? Elisa. William, do I see you off mute?
Well, I sent a chat, and my two selection would be goal. I think it's goal 2 and 5. One is cause and the other is effect.
Thank you.
I would also add, I think 4 is a really important focus for us, just based on me and Rosie's experience with Engage, Empower, Implement. So far, we had a ton of like pre-application meetings and discussions with folks on the staff side and the community-based organization side in our 6-county region. And I think a big current challenge is that some of our jurisdictions and agencies haven't done a ton of like the true community-based planning or meaningful engagement work. So they don't have, that background or context to help strengthen their applications when the time comes around for these funding opportunities.
Thank you. Aaron, do you want to chime in now?
Might talk about five.
Yeah.
Person is looking at me.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just piling on them, and I think 1 and 5 also, but you know, 5, I'm looking at, you know, because the data I think is going to be important to when I think of new board members who come on. I think it's going to be important that data, and I was also thinking about not just racial disparities, but inequities across the board, economically driven, because I think when you go out to whether it's Placer County or, you know, more these rural areas, I think being able to highlight that across the board, again, getting to where all ships rise type of thing, I think that will resonate with new board members and current members alike. So, thank you.
I just wanted to say that going back to the deliverables, I feel like this group can be really, really helpful with EEI and the regional monitoring report. Those are very concrete things. I think that going back to the, you know, the focus areas, not really sure exactly which ones those might be, but as far as just your deliverables for the next year, those feel like very like in alignment with what we could weigh in on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Maria, that was 4 and 5. You're saying 4 and 5?
Going back to the Casey list, it was 3 and 6. And going back to your list, I believe it is 1, 4, and 5.
Oh, real quick,
Yeah, and thanks. And sorry, I'm known for not doing the homework correctly, so I'm probably not following the instructions, but maybe I'm asking some questions as I look at the nonverbal expressions on people's faces. So when they're I guess one is, to what extent are these 5 areas sort of, you know, are they the same level of effort? Like, you know, so that's just the question I have. And then 2, I guess, are there opportunities to blend in some of these areas together? Anyway, so because what I'm hearing is, and so for whatever it's worth is, yeah, like I think there is still, you know, there's probably some highlights, and maybe those highlights are worth lifting up, sort of equity in action, particularly as it relates to meaningful community engagement. But yeah, there's probably lots that needs to continue to be done in this space. And so how does that, are there opportunities to practice that within, I don't know, the transportation pipeline, like, you know, a priority area? And so I guess one question I have is, so I'm not expressing a preference, more like, are these sort of the same level of effort? Are there opportunities to actually combine some? And what does it mean to the working group for this to be a focus area too? So that's just a question that I have. 3 questions.
That's actually what we want to continue to discuss. So what does it mean so we could think about this in a few different ways. There's, where is the working group uniquely positioned to contribute, right? And how is that maybe differentiated from the board, like the broader board, right? Especially when we're thinking about partnering with staff on certain things. So like, where are you all uniquely positioned? There's also like, what sorts of resources and support do you need to like be able to engage and lean in a meaningful way and like sustain that engagement? And then there's also, how are we going to measure, or how might we measure whether or not your engagement has really moved the needle on stuff? And it's been great to sort of hear the narrative of the very specific ways that things have shifted and changed. In this next phase of things, how do we make sure that we're sort of continuing to capture those wins and understand how meaningful this participation is? So that was like 3 different directions you could go in. A brief recap, like what resources and support will help you stay engaged in a meaningful way, right? Where are you all uniquely positioned to engage and plug in? And then how might you measure that, the impact of that engagement over time?
So it's gonna vary across the region, right? I think, you know, I'm hearing, I think you asked 3 questions, and you know, from my perspective as a member of this group, you know, I'm not going to lean on SACOG for resources or training or support. In fact, I'll want to probably be the lead when any of this work is done in El Dorado County, you know, with SACOG as a partner. But, you know, to be frank, if SACOG were to come into El Dorado County and do some race equity inclusion work or some EI work, it would be hard for it to be well received without me kind of managing it and overseeing it. And, you know, we've done that work with we've had that type of partnership for decades. But in other, you know, parts of the region, you know, maybe there is a need for more support and, you know, technical resources and all that. You know, I don't know, but, you know, I see it as it's going to be different for all of us to go back to our respective jurisdictions and carry this water, you know, in partnership with SACOG in a way that we feel is appropriate for our jurisdictions. And that's not really on SACOG, that's on us.
I think if we want to talk about maybe pain points in order to get to where we need to be, I think one of the things that I noticed was the shift from meeting as a larger group and then meeting in smaller groups. That felt very efficient, like an efficient use of time, and in terms of just using our resources and our ability to help. That feels like in alignment with what you need, maybe. And the other thing I noticed too, as more frequently that we met, that also helped me. I mean, like we all have so much going on, right? Like there's lots of inputs every single day. And so, you know, as our knowledge about what you need grows, the more frequently we dive into that, the better we're able, I think, to assist. At least that's my take. So I feel like the pain points might be like the length of time it takes for us to meet, and also the way that we use our time when we're here. It just feels like it's evolved to a very efficient use, in my opinion.
Can I make a staff comment really quickly? Because I think one of the challenges, there's like, you all are uniquely positioned also because of the current makeup. And I just want to acknowledge that, because staff, I think, as evident in this list, I think we need and want support at sometimes pretty granular level. And that's something that, you know, everyone can contribute to. But it looks different. Woody's position is different than Maria's and others, right? The piece that I think is harder for staff to do alone is that we can't do in the same way, is really make the connections at the board level, and sort of that piece about especially with the board working group members, your peers and others, and bringing them along. And then that bigger picture thinking, right? The bigger evaluation, like sort of the regional monitoring report piece, that big picture. So I know you know that, but I just want to state it from a staff perspective, because there are things that we can't do. And for all of us to move together, we need advocates to move in those different spaces. And then just to Maria's point, I think that if there are ways where there's sort of a group focus, and then these other opportunities that are more dialed in at I don't know if it's ad hoc, but kind of like focus pathways for the year, that might be a way to kind of help in where you feel you're most equipped, and to meet some of those staff needs, knowing that we have many and too many asks, but just suggesting that.
I talked about this a little bit during our ad hoc, about how I always feel like I'm the weird creative person who is not a technical expert, is not a transportation, like, you know, junkie. And, you know, I do just enough to be, you know, pretty dangerous. And so, but I think the question does need to be asked, like, where do we feel like we can add value? And because we don't all need to add value at every single, you know, point. So, I mean, maybe that's something we just send to you, you know, after this meeting, or, you know, I don't think we have time to talk about it now, but. I know what I want to work on.
Folks on Zoom? Any reflections, thoughts? Okay.
If we
Back in
pick
the
more
room.
than one, James is gonna increase our membership dues, so we gotta look at one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I like 245, and the reason I'm drawn to 2 is because it's kind of it's very pragmatic. It's like, it's something that we could do and measure and have an outcome with, and I think that it's like sometimes when you want to move ahead, you just have to get the base hits. And if you're a Dodger fan, sorry, but I think it would allow us those measurable base hits.
So I don't, well, you asked some questions here, which is good, right? Because partly it's like, where do you see some priorities or some opportunity? And then also, give us your feedback and then ask clarification questions, right? Raul, you asked, are all these a similar level of effort? I didn't answer it right away because I've just actually been thinking about that. In some way, and maybe Woody was saying a little bit of this, we can dial this up and down as like we could spend all of next year on meaningful community engagement. We could do that. We could probably dial it up in a way. So it's a little, so the answer is no, it's not on the same level of effort. We obviously wouldn't put these up if we didn't think you had something important to offer to us, right? And that these aren't going to be things that we're going to have to tackle in the next year to 18 months anyway. So, and maybe what we're doing here is, look to our facilitator, Danielle, but just trying to get your temperature, right? Your questions, your clarification, your temperature, and then kind of like, as we often do, is we'll go back and think a little bit about this and come back to you. We don't want to come up with it. We want to do something that is meaningful, helpful to staff, but meaningful to you. Like we want to have an agenda next year for the RA working group that you can feel like, you know what? Like, I would come to that. That's actually, that's good. That feels impactful, right?
James, so did I hear the question answered? Could we take 2 of these and turn them into 1? Could we combine? Was that question ever answered?
Oh, we can certainly look at that. It's hard for me on the fly. I mean, yeah, are there absolute bright lines between these? No. No.
Because I do think there's some similarities between a couple that could be combined, and I heard some other people say the same thing. So if in fact you're not looking at 5, you're looking at 4, with 1 being combined, that helps me as far as being able to move forward.
Maybe 2.
Yeah, two is definitely one of them. But I'm also thinking about the newness of the board coming in and how much work is going to be put into getting them up and ready to do the work that needs to be done. And so
I think some of this is baked into your work program too. I mean, with triple bottom line, I think, as the RTPA for the 4 counties, you already work with your partner agencies to develop the transportation projects that are going to be submitted for the application for the funding round, and maybe you bolster the engagement with CBOs and do that work. But I mean, there's a lot of this that is already starting to be integrated into what you do already. I think for me, what would be helpful as a member of the working group is, over the next year or two, we meet and find out what the rest of the region, the public agencies in the region, members of this group have done or are doing to try to, from our perspective, shape transportation projects so they fit within the framework of this and the funding round and all that. I mean, that would be helpful for me to hear what other, small agencies or parts of the region are working on. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead of you.
I was just gonna echo what Rick mentioned about the newness of the board, and that the shaping of what that looks like and how the momentum can be maintained. And I think that's probably why I was drawn to 1 and 5, given the current timing. and then just what's going on across different cities and jurisdictions and change, to set and level set and ground, those new folks into it so the momentum isn't lost. But I would also say, I just, I asked the question around, can they, be combined? But if there's very distinct pathways for, like, for example, in 5, if it's develop and share data, and I'm looking more at the explanation and the great materials that you provided in terms of the monitoring report and the data dashboards, that is very different than 1. So, and then I see the connection to 4 to 5, if there is those monitoring and dashboards that could help create content and meaningful communication strategies, it could maybe bolster 4. So I think it just, and I definitely appreciate it. I could see various levels of work happening throughout all of these. So maybe it's something that we kind of have to sit with, but I really want to say that if it doesn't feel comfortable to combine and they need to be, then because they have very distinct pathways and they require a level of expertise and resources that is different than one another, then don't, because you want the integrity of both of them. So wanted to kind of just put that out there as well.
Can I get you go? Can we go back to the previous slide? One thing I sort of feel compelled to tell you, and obviously it's got our vice chair of the board, Director Soon here, who will be the chair of the board next year. And we've been talking a little bit about what could a training look like for the board next year, that is likely be voluntary. So people would have to put their hands up and say, yep, I'm interested. That is outside the formality of a board meeting, right? And allows people, this came up in some of our ad hocs as well, right? Allows a little bit more of an informal conversation, right? Opening minds and opening hearts. I went through a training last year on implicit bias, and I thought like, oh yeah, I understand implicit bias, but it was eye-opening to go through that, right? And it was a doorway in some ways that I could see some of our newer board members walk through, and so we're talking to some people about what that might look like. I just wanted to put that out there. It's very specific, I know, but in terms of number 1, because many of you have mentioned, you've hit on number 1, right? And the full board experience and where the board is at and having them understand the terms, the definitions, and showing up. We don't want ideally a lot of space between the REI working group and the full board. Like we want that connection, and we try to do that often, right? By having report outs to the full board, and we were going to have that brag session you just walked through earlier, right? We're going to actually do that November 14th for the full board, so people understand this is meaningful work and it exists not just in isolation, but so we can dig into more about that, but just that's something that we've started to talk about is what's the program next year look like that can go beyond the formality of the board meeting itself.
That's helpful. And so, yeah, like, if we think about even sort of the principles of change management, right? You've got to be able to sort of secure buy-in. And you talked about sort of opening hearts and minds. And so, yeah, but there's also, there may be other sort of motivations too, beyond sort of hearts and minds, right? Sort of the increasing set of sort of federal and state expectations around some of this work. And so maybe we offer folks a sort of a range of reasons that they may be able to get behind. But I agree, like, yeah, it's going to be hard to do 2 through 5 or 2 through 10, whatever, if you don't have sort of, and then, how do you take maybe going back to our values, and we have a long list, right? We've got like 15, but I think one of them is to normalize conversations. And so through, if it's through maybe informal, sort of formal settings, balance of the two, that there's this is going to be evergreen work as new folks come in and out, not just the board, but maybe even when the working group roster is refreshed too. So yeah, thank you, that's helpful.
In the vein of like, are they weighted the same? Do they all happen at the same time? Just pointing out, like, this is actually for a 2-year sort of arc. And so it may be that only a few of them or 2 of them or 1 of them is happening for the first 6 months of next year, like all the focus on the board onboarding, right? Then you have a chance to sort of shift and move. So to James's point, this was kind of like, are we headed in the right direction? Any glaring missing pieces that you see? Also, like, do these feel exciting and interesting, or do they resonate? And you know, this is also in conjunction with kind of coming back, which we'll talk about what next month's meeting will be focused on, but it's kind of a package of what's the game plan for next year. And so this is like one piece of that game plan is sort of thinking about these focus areas.
One more thing, this will be a quick 10-second hit, but it also occurs to me that as the board composition changes, there's also might be changes in the kind of transportation planning built environment space as well, right? And so, and you know, what kind of socialization, sort of outreach of this needs to be done to that sort of crop of folks that maybe aren't elected, but are in an influence-making position, so. Yeah, thanks.
You know, I'm just gonna throw out a crazy idea. If the board composition is changing, you know, pretty significantly, is this an opportunity for the board to, you know, really communicate out its commitment to REI in a way that, because this is a humongous effort, right, that you're undertaking here.
Right.
And I'm not sure people are really connecting the dots between SACOG and racial equity and inclusion. And we brought this up a little bit in our ad hoc. And that is there a way at an organizational level, you know, so like really zooming out and communicating in a very simple way, not just with this, you know, this new board that you'll have, but also with your external audiences and stakeholders, what it is you're actually doing through a tagline of some kind that goes along with SACOG. So it's not just SACOG, right? It'd be SACOG like, you know, equitably connecting communities, or, you know, I don't know what the tagline is, but do you know what I mean? In a very short, succinct way, communicating the importance of what this is at a very high level. And then really everything kind of flows from that. You know, that creates the framework, but incorporating it into really what I would say is a very strong statement of purpose for the organization. Like I said, crazy idea, like I'm just throwing it out there. But I think 4 years in, right? Yeah.
Let me throw out a crazier idea, maybe.
What?
Like culture building practitioner privilege right now. I think a nice way to kick off this refreshed board next year, if you could swing a retreat that brings this body together with that body for some, like a full day, right? Cover a number of things, but also cultivate that rapport relationship, to your point about being able to be advocates, right? And also look at it as an opportunity to develop some shared language around equity. So maybe it stops short of a full-on like implicit bias training, but it's more of like in the spirit of, this is what the REI working group has been operating under. This is the terminology that we're tossing out and throwing around. We want to normalize it so that when we're in conversation, we're having we're speaking the same language. And so it's a little bit lighter touch, but allows for folks to sort of meet one another in a different way. So I don't know bylaw wise what's possible, but I do think that laying a strong foundation at the outset would really set you up to like fly through some of this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's critical. I think number one is, I mean, if we're not successful with number one, the rest doesn't really mean much anyway, right? You know, we're gonna have new board members come in that ask, you know, why are we using race, equity, and inclusion on a overlay project in South Placer County? You know, why are we scoring it based on proximity to disadvantaged community? We know we're gonna have those folks show up. And so I think it's gonna be critical and really hard work for you, especially to get that, you know, to carry this momentum forward and make sure that the entire board is, or the majority of the board is still supportive of this. And I think that's a great idea to have us engage with that new board. And
if I could chime in real quick, I agree. I think the board members hearing from this group and interacting would be great. I do also feel like it's going to be a little bit of a groundhog day for some of us because the two board members will come in and they won't, we have to meet people where they're at, right? So they won't have this background. And so as I think back for myself, when we formed this whole thing, way back when the Brookings Institute came out with its study, right there, I don't know how many new board members will even be aware of why this came about. So I think a little bit of history and, explanation of why we even embarked on this. And then, the implicit bias training that James and I, were talking about, that would be to reinforce, hey, we do have some blind spots. So you may not think right off the bat this is valuable, but if you recognize that, oh, you had some blind spots, then you might open up to these other things. And then of course, the aspirational goals of that Brookings Institute of what this region can become, if we were to, all these things that we're working on and were to be implemented, if we can get to that point, the new members, and they can see where we're going, right? Why we started, where we're headed to. I think then you bring everybody together and their minds are more open and willing to hear more. So I feel like we just have to do it in the right time. If we just throw folks in, they don't, their head is spinning. So I would just put that out there.
So this is great brainstorming. Yeah, sorry, Dr. Lauren.
We got, like, that's part of the foundation is to know not just where we're going, but why.
So, and for the public members, we had a book, yeah, okay, we had a book club. So there's a couple of things just to like, these are great. This is exactly the kind of like, wait, what if we did this? And then we could do a retreat and we, that's what we're looking for. We did this year, but we have a February, like we have sort of penciled in February board meeting, REI refresher, full board. Now, Casey and I did that jointly this past year, but I do think we've said there's a power to board members and these REI working group members providing some of that to your peers. That's a powerful thing. We have a board retreat. I don't know if Director Sooner and I have started talking about the chair's kind of prerogative is you get to have the board retreat in your home jurisdiction. Well, guess what? Elk Grove has done a lot of really good stuff around implicit bias, right? You've been on a journey with your city. And so when we can not just say SACOG thinks the following things, but here's a jurisdiction that is tackling this and has been tackling it, right? That is, that is powerful among the peer cohort.
Thank you, James. And yeah, I won't speak to all that, but definitely we've had transformation within our organization. It was driven by external forces. So and the retreat, we talked about too, bringing in the Wilton Rancheria tribe, right? And so I think, if we can get Chairman Triango to talk about his experiences, and I think all of that can be just very, very great information and a great platform to kick things off and do exactly what we're all trying to get at here, just raising awareness and appreciation of what we're doing.
I think we're also really fortunate in having, you as the chair next year as a champion of this work. Director Jennings is going to be on the board. We all like to think that our elected officials listen to us, and believe everything we say, but I think they really respect their peers on the SACOG board. I think having champions like the two of you to help bring those new members up to speed and kind of help, mold and shape them will be a great benefit for us, definitely.
That's the perfect segue because we've reached our time. Chair Jennings, do you want to close us out?
So this has been a really good discussion, and I want to thank all of you for in being involved in it and really giving your input because it's been very helpful. Staff is going to use all this information to update our goals and objectives on the Racial Equity Action Plan. Then they'll send it to us before the next meeting. The next meeting is scheduled right now for December the 6th. So that'll give us some time to digest what we've heard today and then get ready for that next meeting on the 6th of December. And then take full action to recommend them to the full SACOG board for adoption. That's what we will do on that 6th. We will either make the changes that we need to make, whether they be small or large, and then we will have a document that we'll be able to take to the full board for their adoption as well at that time. I don't know when the first meeting is for SACOG after our December 6th meeting. Is there a date for that? For the full board? December the 19th. Okay. So we need to be ready for that December 19th meeting. We'll get together on the 6th, come to agreement on our final version. So you got plenty of time between now and then to think about all the stuff that we talked about today and any other ideas, whether they be crazy or not, crazy ideas or not. I love crazy ideas. I call them BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. So I'm fine with that. But I just want to thank you all for being here today and dedicating your time. This has been well spent, and it's been a great discussion, and I really think we are making incredible progress. So I want to thank staff. I want to thank each of the board members. I just want to thank the committee members and everybody for their work in this area that is so important. And in case you didn't know it, yesterday was, or someday, 14th of December, Ruby Bridges walk to school day, right? And their whole goal and the foundation, Ruby Bridges Foundation, she's still alive and doing well, is to eliminate racism and to make sure that we also eliminate kids that are argue, fussing, and fighting, and bullying. So the real subject matter is bullying, but the argue, fussing, and fighting goes under the subject matter of bullying. So I got a chance to talk to an incredible group of 8th graders yesterday about this Ruby Bridges and the work that she's done. And each one of them committed to being the next SACOG members or the next jurisdiction members in your respective jurisdictions. And so they all raised their hand because you've got to pass the torch. And I told them, I can't keep doing this forever. I'm passing the torch. I want you to know that this baton is coming to you, and it's coming sooner than you know. So get ready for the next step of making sure we eliminate racism, and we also eliminate the whole aspect of kids bullying each other. So, and more. So thank you all for coming. I appreciate you very much. Hope you had a great day and enjoyed this time here. And until we meet again.
Chair Jennings, before we all leave, I just want to say on behalf of all of us, thank you for all your leadership throughout these past couple of years on this committee. You bring a flair and I think a humorous, light touch, but a great leadership, and we really appreciate your service, and we're not going to let you go far. I'll tell you that.
Hey, look, I'm going to be here with you all the way to the end because this is something that's very important for all of us.
Yeah.
You know, all of us, you know, not just people of color, it's for all of us.
Absolutely.
We got to get this right. In my lifetime, we have to get this right, and we will. Yes, we will. That's why I really enjoy this team, because this team, we can have conversations in a safe space and be able to walk out of here knowing we had some conversations with people who think like we think, that the way of racism and discrimination and all that should not be the way of the world. It should be in a way of the world where we all love each other with all our hearts and soul and support each other for the rest of our lives. So thank you.
You're here.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
I appreciate you. Okay. Yeah.